Mirabel knew what it meant to grow up with nothing. She was born into poverty, raised by a father who had little more than his name and his kindness to offer the world. Yet even in their humble home, she had known love, until illness took her father from her and left her alone. Jonathan Luke, her father's closest friend, stepped in when no one else would. They had been like brothers, and even though Jonathan had little himself at the time, he promised to take care of Mirabel like his own. Years passed, and fortune favored Jonathan. He built a name in the food industry with his flagship business, the Luke 5-star restaurant. Money flowed in, respect followed, and with it came a grand house, new cars, and the kind of life that Mirabel used to only see in magazines. When Jonathan brought Mirabel into his new home, she was 17 and still raw from the pain of losing her father. She had thought her life would finally change, that maybe all her silent prayers were being answered. She carried hope in her heart as she stepped into the mansion on Rosewood Avenue, dragging behind her the small bag of clothes and dreams. But she was wrong. The house was beautiful, but it was no home. From the moment she walked in, Ava Luke, Jonathan's wife, made her position clear. "You're here because of my husband's sentimentality," she said, her lips curled in polite disgust. "Don't mistake this place for a charity." Mirabel didn't respond. She had learned to swallow her pride a long time ago. Gabriella and Daniela, Jonathan's daughters, were no different. Gabriella was loud and vain, constantly obsessed with her appearance and the attention of boys. Daniela was quieter, more calculating, but just as lazy. Neither of them lifted a finger in the house, not even to wash their own clothes. That was Mirabel's job now. She became the invisible hand that kept the household running. Cooking, scrubbing, ironing. She never complained. Where would she go? What did she have? Yet even in the middle of her suffering, she noticed something. Jonathan. He was kind. He never raised his voice at her, never ignored her presence. And unlike the others, he seemed to see her for who she was. Maybe that was why she clung to her tasks and did them with care, hoping to show her gratitude in the only way she could. It wasn't long before Mirabel found herself drawn to his work. The business fascinated her. The restaurant, the customers, the operations. It all felt like something she could be good at. She started asking Jonathan questions, started reading the files left on the dining room table. Sometimes, when no one was watching, she'd even practice taking orders or handling receipts with old notebooks. Jonathan noticed. He began taking her along to the restaurant occasionally, not as a server, but as a silent observer. "Smart girl," he told her once in the car, his eyes on the road. "You've got an eye for business. My daughters aren't interested, but maybe you—" He didn't finish the sentence, but she carried those words with her like a medal. Of course, Ava didn't like it. She confronted her husband more than once. Loud arguments bouncing off the marble walls. "Stop dragging that girl into our affairs. What will people say?" But Jonathan didn't bend like he used to. "This is my business," he'd snap, "and I'll run it how I see fit." The shift in power shocked Ava. She had always been the loudest voice in the room, the one who made decisions with a smile that barely masked her bitterness. For the first time in years, Jonathan was pushing back. Daniela noticed too. She started using Mirabel for her own gain. School projects, online assignments, even romantic conversations with boys. Daniela would hand Mirabel her phone and say, "Talk to him for me. Make it interesting." Mirabel did it all. What choice did she have? Gabriella brought home a boyfriend. Tall, well-dressed, arrogant in the way rich boys often were. They laughed loudly in the living room while Mirabel swept in the corner. Gabriella snapped her fingers and called out, "Mirabel, bring us something to eat." Mirabel nodded and returned minutes later with a tray. As she set it down, the boy looked at her, really looked at her. His smile paused. His eyes lingered. This girl is beautiful, he thought. And it was true. Beneath the hand-me-down clothes and silent demeanor, Mirabel was striking. A kind of beauty that didn't scream for attention, but demanded it all the same. He started visiting more often. But it wasn't Gabriella who pulled him back. It was Mirabel. The way she moved, the softness in her voice, the quiet strength she carried. One day, he caught her alone near the gate and handed her a bag. "Some clothes," he said, his eyes sincere. "You deserve better." Mirabel stepped back like he'd handed her fire. "No," she whispered. "I can't take this. Please don't give me anything. People talk." He didn't argue, just nodded, and left the bag on the bench before walking away. She left it there, untouched, but the moment stayed with her. Not because of the clothes, but because for the first time, someone had seen her, not as a maid, not as an orphan, but as someone. A knock came at her door before sunrise the next morning. Not the urgent kind, just a quick, dry tap. "Mirabel," Jonathan's voice called softly. "Get dressed, you're coming with me." She slipped into a clean shirt and worn jeans, tied her hair in a bun, and followed him out to the car. The ride was mostly silent, the street still groggy with sleep. He didn't explain much, only handed her a paper bag with a croissant and juice and said, "Eat." That was Jonathan. When he wasn't being overshadowed by his household, he was kind. Gentle in a way his wife and daughters were incapable of being. He drove them to the Luke 5-star restaurant. By now, Mirabel knew every tile on the floor, every scent of the kitchen, but today felt different. "I want you to sit in the manager's office today," he said as they walked in. "You won't talk, you'll just watch." She did, for hours. She watched staff check inventory, take phone calls, balance receipts. She studied their rhythm. She noticed who came late, who lied, who worked like they actually cared. She didn't know what Jonathan was looking for, but she gave her attention like it was gold. When they got back home, no one asked where they'd been, but Ava noticed the restaurant scent clinging to her. Gabriella rolled her eyes and made a scene about how the maid now smells like a kitchen. Daniela said nothing, but Mirabel caught the way her eyes narrowed in quiet judgment. Things got colder in the house after that. Ava became more cutting with her words. Gabriella started assigning her impossible tasks, cleaning bathrooms twice a day, rewashing already clean clothes, serving meals late into the night and complaining loudly if she so much as forgot a spoon. Yet despite it all, Jonathan still took her with him. Twice a week, sometimes more. He gave her simple tasks at first, taking note of expenses, listening to customer complaints. Then came training manuals, meetings, silent observations. She never overstepped, only did what was asked. But she was learning, and Jonathan knew it. What she didn't know, however, was that Jonathan's strength was fading. At first, it was subtle. A deep breath before climbing stairs, a hand against the wall for balance. Then it became obvious. His clothes hung loosely on his frame, his eyes duller than before. He stopped eating properly, missed meetings, took calls from the bed. One day Mirabel overheard him speaking with a doctor over the phone. "Your kidneys are failing, Mr. Luke. The dialysis is only a temporary solution. You need a transplant urgently." He didn't tell his wife, didn't tell his daughters, but Mirabel had heard everything. Later that week, the truth found its way to Ava and the girls anyway, through unopened mail and quiet hospital visits. And while they gasped and cried and hugged each other in front of him, their real panic began in private. No one wanted to get tested. Gabriella outright refused. "I'm too young," she said. "What if I need both kidneys later?" Daniela, in her usual fashion, avoided the topic completely. Ava paced for days, dramatizing her migraines and fanning herself every time the doctor's name came up. They told the hospital to look elsewhere. "Find an outside donor," they said. "It's too risky to use a family member." But Mirabel couldn't stay silent. She approached the doctor privately. "I want to be tested," she said. The man blinked. "You're not his biological child." "No," she said, "but he's the only father I have." Tears burned her eyes as she signed the forms. In her heart, she didn't feel brave, only grateful. For the food, for the roof, for the education she had scraped together while others wore designer bags and slept in silk. Jonathan had done more for her than anyone ever had, and by some twist of fate, she was a match. When Jonathan returned home from a long, weakening dialysis session, Mirabel stood by the door, waiting. Her hands trembled as she helped him sit down. His body, once so full of strength, looked like paper. "Mirabel," he said quietly, "they told me what you did." She didn't answer. He reached for her hand. His voice cracked. "My own blood turned their backs on me. And you gave me your kidney." I'll never forget it. Never. For the first time, she let herself cry in front of him. The surgery was scheduled a week later. It was early morning, the kind of morning that makes everything seem possible, even survival. Jonathan was prepped in one wing of the hospital, Mirabel in another. She signed forms she didn't fully understand. But what she did understand, deeply and without doubt, was this: she was doing the right thing. Before they wheeled her away, she asked one of the nurses, "Will he live a full life again?" The nurse hesitated. "We'll do our best." That was enough. When she woke up, the pain was a dull, heavy throb, but her spirit was light. She was told the surgery was successful. Jonathan was stable. And for the first time in months, the whole household felt like it could breathe again, even if most of them were only relieved that they wouldn't be the ones giving up anything. Ava didn't visit her at the hospital. Neither did the daughters. Jonathan did, though, as soon as he could stand again. He brought flowers, nothing fancy, just a small bouquet of white lilies with a note tucked inside. "You've given me more than life. You've given me a reason to believe people can be good." Mirabel wept silently as she read the note over and over again. Weeks passed, then months. Jonathan recovered well, at least at first. He returned to the restaurant gradually, started reviewing files again, and smiled more often. The sparkle in his eyes came back, and so did his laugh. He even started making plans to travel with Mirabel to scout new locations for their next branch in Atlanta. But somewhere between the excitement and the hope, his health began to falter once more. At first, he ignored the fatigue, then the nausea, then the pain. But denial has an expiration date. 6 months after the transplant, the infection started. It moved fast, too fast. The doctors did everything. Mirabel stayed at the hospital every single day. She cleaned his face with warm cloths, read his emails aloud, laughed at jokes he could no longer say but only smile at. But it wasn't enough. Jonathan Luke passed away on a Thursday morning. The sky was painfully blue. Mirabel had just stepped out to get a cup of tea when it happened. A quiet exit. No pain, just peace. She collapsed when she heard. At the hospital corridor, she screamed, "Let him have the other one. Take my second kidney. Let him wake up again." Nurses rushed to calm her. Doctors tried to explain, but nothing anyone said reached her. Grief consumed her in waves. The funeral was beautiful and grand, attended by chefs, city workers, distant cousins, people who hadn't spoken to Jonathan in years, but wanted to be seen grieving. His casket was gold-trimmed. The flowers were loud. The prayers were long. Ava wore a dramatic black dress and a veil so thick you couldn't see her face. Gabriella posted her funeral outfit on Instagram with the caption, "Goodbye, Daddy." Mirabel didn't speak. She stood at the back in a simple black dress and cried through all of it. But Jonathan wasn't done speaking. Not yet. A week after the burial, the family lawyer arrived with a folder of papers. The living room was full. Ava on one couch, Gabriella scrolling on her phone, Daniela filing her nails. Mirabel stood in the corner, unsure if she should even be there. The lawyer cleared his throat. "I'm here to read the last will and testament of Mr. Jonathan Luke." No one reacted. They already assumed what it would say. The business, the estate, the accounts. Of course, everything would go to his wife and daughters. But then the lawyer said, "I, Jonathan Luke, being of sound mind, do hereby leave all of my earthly possessions, businesses, investments, and estate to Mirabel, my third daughter in every way that matters." Silence. Ava's mouth dropped open. Gabriella sat upright, suddenly attentive. Daniela muttered, "What?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses and read it again. Yes, every single thing. The Luke 5-star restaurant. All liquid assets, all properties. The house you're sitting in. Everything belongs to Mirabel now. Ava stood up. This is a joke. A maid. The lawyer didn't flinch. He signed this before his final hospitalization. It was notarized and witnessed, legally binding, and as executor of his estate, I will ensure it's followed to the letter. Gabriella stormed out of the room. Daniela blinked back tears, not of sadness, but disbelief. Ava sank back into her seat, shaking. Mirabel didn't say a word. She left the room quietly and went upstairs. She didn't run out in tears this time. She walked, shoulders squared, steps measured. Her eyes were dry, not because she wasn't overwhelmed, but because the emotion was beyond tears. She sat on her small bed, the same one she'd cried herself to sleep on so many nights, and stared at her hands. These hands had scrubbed floors. These hands had poured soup into bowls without ever tasting it first. These hands had held a father as he faded from this world. And now, these same hands owned everything. In the month that followed, Mirabel didn't seek revenge. She sought restoration. She renovated the restaurant, opened 2 more in Jonathan's name, one in Atlanta, one in Houston. She hired staff who had once been ignored, paid everyone fair, gave scholarships to kitchen staff's children. She ran the business with the grace Jonathan had taught her and the dignity he had given her. Ava and her daughters, they now worked under Mirabel, not because she forced them to, but because they had no other choice.